What if the simplest act of kindness, a gesture worth less than $20, could unravel a lie worth billions? For Liam O'Connell, an architect sketching his dreams on a napkin, buying a meal for a distraught waitress was just the right thing to do. He saw a fellow human being struggling and he acted. He had no idea that the woman with tear-filled eyes and a coffee-stained apron was Isabella Rossi, the reclusive CEO of Aura Innovations, and heiress to a fortune that could reshape skylines. This isn't a fairy tale. It's the gripping story of how one small moment of grace in a greasy spoon diner set two worlds on a collision course, igniting a dramatic test of character, trust, and love. The rain fell on the streets of Seattle with a persistent, dreary rhythm, blurring the neon signs into watercolors on the slick asphalt. Inside the corner spoon, the air was thick with the comforting trinity of diner smells, sizzling bacon-brewing coffee, and the faint, sweet scent of pancake syrup. It was a haven of worn-out vinyl booths and chipped ceramic mugs, a place where time seemed to slow down, and for a few dollars you could buy a slice of simple, unpretentious peace. Liam O'Connell was a regular. He sat in his usual booth in the back, the one with a small crack in the red vinyl that he'd long since stopped noticing. A large sketchbook lay open on the table, its pages filled with the sharp, clean lines of buildings that didn't yet exist. At 32, Liam was an architect whose ambition far outstripped his firm's reputation. O'Connell & Croft was a small, two-man operation that mostly handled renovations and modest commercial projects. But in his sketchbook and in his mind, Liam built titans of glass and steel that pierced the clouds. He was nursing his third coffee, trying to solve a design flaw in a cantilevered balcony when the commotion started. It wasn't loud, just a shift in the diner's comfortable hum. He looked up to see the new waitress fumbling with a tray laden with plates. She was young, maybe mid-20s, with wide, expressive brown eyes that currently held a look of pure panic. Her dark hair was pulled back in a slightly messy ponytail, and her standard-issue pink uniform seemed a size too big. He'd seen her a few times over the past couple of weeks. She was clumsy. Endearingly so. She always seemed to be moving just a little too fast, a little too nervously, as if she were profoundly out of her element. Marge, the diner's owner, and a woman built like a small but sturdy tugboat, was constantly following her with a patient but weary sigh. Today was particularly bad. As the new waitress tried to navigate the narrow aisle, a customer shifted his chair back without looking. The waitress whose name tag read Bella stumbled, the tray tilted at an impossible angle. For a moment, time froze. Then, gravity won. A full cup of hot coffee cartwheeled through the air, and a tidal wave of dark liquid arced directly towards Liam's table. He instinctively pulled his sketchbook back, but his arm wasn't fast enough. The hot coffee splashed across his forearm and soaked the sleeve of his grey Henley. It stung, a sharp, surprising heat. "Oh my God, I am so sorry," Bella cried, her face flushing a deep crimson. Plates clattered to the floor, thankfully not breaking, but the mess was immediate and chaotic. Marge was there in a flash. "Bella, for heaven's sake, go get a wet cloth. Sir, are you all right?" Liam winced more from the shock than the pain, and forced a smile. "I'm fine, Marge. It's just coffee. I've had worse." He looked at Bella, who stood frozen, looking at his arm and the mess on the floor, as if she'd just caused a natural disaster. Her eyes were welling up with tears of pure mortification. He saw something in her then, not just embarrassment, but a deep, bone-weary exhaustion. It was a look he recognized. He'd seen it on his own mother's face years ago, working 2 jobs to keep their small apartment, where every broken dish was a potential financial crisis. "Hey," he said softly, his voice cutting through her panic. It's okay. Really, it's just a shirt. She finally looked at him, her eyes wide and glistening. I'm so sorry. I'll pay for the cleaning. I'll pay for your meal. Don't be ridiculous, Liam said, grabbing some napkins to dab at his sleeve. Accidents happen. The rest of the evening passed quietly. Marge sent Bella to the back to clean up while she handled Liam's table. He finished his sketch, paid his bill, and left a generous tip. As he was putting on his jacket to leave, he saw Bella at the end of the counter, talking quietly with Marge. Her shift was over, and she was sitting with a simple plate of toast and a glass of water. Her shoulders were slumped in defeat. He overheard snippets of their conversation. My wallet. I must have left it on the bus, or maybe it was taken. Bella was saying, her voice strained. Marge, I can work it off tomorrow, I swear. I'll come in early to prep. Honey, don't worry about it, Marge said, though her own expression was tight with the worry of a small business owner. Just eat. We'll figure it out. Liam felt a familiar pang in his chest. It was the quiet desperation, the suffocating shame of not having enough for a simple meal. He knew that feeling intimately. He knew how it could hollow you out. Without a second thought, he walked to the counter. Marge looked up, surprised to see him still there. Bella didn't notice him. She was staring down at her plate, pushing a piece of toast around with her fork. Liam spoke quietly to Marge. Add her meal to my tab. Marge raised an eyebrow. You sure, Liam? You don't have to do that. I know, he said, pulling out a $20 bill and placing it on the counter. This should cover it and then some. Just don't tell her it was me. Just say someone took care of it. He didn't want to thank you. He didn't want to make her feel indebted or embarrassed. He just wanted to lift a small weight from her obviously burdened shoulders. Marge gave him a small, knowing smile and nodded, tucking the bill away. Liam turned to leave, but paused. He took a pen from his jacket pocket, tore a corner from a napkin, and wrote a few words. Everyone has tough days. Tomorrow will be better. He folded the small piece of paper and slid it onto the counter next to Bella's water glass, before walking out into the cold Seattle rain, the slight sting on his arm already forgotten. He had no way of knowing that his simple act of kindness, born from a memory of his own past, had just irrevocably altered his future. He didn't know that the clumsy waitress named Bella was in fact Isabella Rossi, a woman whose net worth was greater than the GDP of a small country, and who was in the middle of the most important and deceptive mission of her life. Hours later, Isabella Rossi sat not in a worn-out vinyl booth, but on a plush, cream-colored sofa in her penthouse apartment overlooking Elliott Bay. The sprawling space was a monument to minimalist luxury, floor-to-ceiling windows, museum-quality art and technology so seamlessly integrated it was practically invisible. The pink waitress uniform was in a heap on the floor of her walk-in closet, a jarring splash of polyester in a sea of silk and cashmere. She was nursing a glass of water, sparkling from a ridiculously expensive bottle, and staring at the small, slightly damp piece of napkin on her marble coffee table. Everyone has tough days. Tomorrow will be better. Tears, real and unrestrained this time, streamed down her face. They weren't tears of mortification or exhaustion, but of a strange, overwhelming cocktail of gratitude and profound loneliness. For the past month, she had been living a lie. The clumsy, cash-strapped waitress, Bella, was a character she had meticulously crafted. The stolen wallet, the constant fumbling, the air of perpetual anxiety, it was all an act, a test. Her father, Lorenzo Rossi, was the architect of this charade. A titan of industry, a ruthless but brilliant man who had built the global tech empire Aura Innovations from nothing, Lorenzo was now battling a degenerative illness that had forced him to step back. He had handed the CEO title to Isabella, his only child, whom he had groomed for the role since she could read a stock ticker. She had the intellect, the drive, and the vision. What she didn't have, in his opinion, was a discerning heart. They see the name, the money. He had told her, his voice, a gravelly whisper from his armchair. They are vultures in bespoke suits, Isabella. They will tell you whatever you want to hear. How can you lead this company? How can you build a life if you can't see the person behind the proposal, go and live among them? For 1 month. No money, no name. Find one person, just one, who shows you genuine kindness without knowing what you can do for them. Find that, and you will have found a compass for the rest of your life. So she had become Bella. She'd rented a tiny rundown apartment, taken the bus and gotten a job at the corner Spoon. And it had been brutal. The condescending looks, the dismissive waves, the sheer physical exhaustion. It was a world away from boardrooms and charity galas. She had been propositioned, ignored, and treated as invisible. Until tonight. The man in the booth, Liam, hadn't looked at her with pity or annoyance. Even after she'd spilled hot coffee on him, his eyes held only a gentle concern. His act of paying for her meal anonymously, without seeking any recognition, was the purest gesture she had experienced in years. It was the first time someone had seen her, or at least the struggling person she was pretending to be, and offered help without an agenda. It was a single point of light in the cynical darkness her father had warned her about. She carefully picked up the napkin, her fingers tracing the simple, strong handwriting. She didn't know his name, only that he was an architect who dreamed on paper. And in that moment, in her sterile, silent penthouse, she felt a connection to him that was more real than any she had with the countless suitors and business partners who fawned over Isabella Rossi. Meanwhile, across town, Liam O'Connell was in his own, much smaller, much messier apartment, running cold water over his slightly reddened forearm. The sting was gone, but the incident lingered in his mind. He thought about the waitress Bella and the raw panic in her eyes. He hoped Marge hadn't told her who paid. He hoped the note hadn't sounded condescending. He shook his head, trying to clear it, and walked back to his drafting table. Pinned to the wall in front of him was a single sheet of paper, the official request for proposal for the new Aura Innovations North American headquarters. It was the project of a lifetime. A landmark. Aura Innovations was the most secretive and influential tech company in the world, and they were building a new campus that was rumored to be the most ambitious architectural undertaking of the decade. They had unusually opened the initial bidding not just to the giant world-famous firms, but to smaller local practices as well, seeking a truly innovative and human-centric design. For Liam and his partner David Croft, it was a laughable long shot. They were gnats trying to take down a giant. But for the last 6 weeks, they had poured every ounce of their creativity, energy, and money into their proposal. Liam hadn't slept more than 4 hours a night. Their design was bold, sustainable, and focused on the well-being of the people who would work there, a far cry from the cold, sterile campuses of other tech giants. It was the culmination of everything Liam believed architecture should be. Their final presentation was in 3 days. They were one of 10 firms shortlisted for the first round of interviews. Just getting in the room was a victory. As he looked over the blueprints, a wave of exhaustion hit him. He was running on fumes, fueled by coffee and a desperate hope. He thought back to the diner, to the simple warmth of the place, and to the waitress with the sad, beautiful eyes. He found himself smiling. Her disastrous coffee spill had strangely been a moment of human connection in a week filled with stress and solitude, He hoped her tomorrow would indeed be better. He had his own impossible tomorrow to prepare for a meeting with the faceless executives of Aura Innovations, a world so far removed from the corner spoon, it might as well be on another planet. The Aura Innovations building was less an office and more a temple of modernism. It was an imposing structure of dark glass and brushed steel that seemed to absorb the light around it. The lobby was vast and silent, the air chilled to a precise temperature. The only sound was the hushed whisper of their shoes on the polished marble floor. Liam clutched his presentation portfolio, his knuckles white. Beside him, his partner David Croft was fidgeting with his tie, his usual jovial demeanor replaced by a mask of sheer terror. "Just breathe, David," Liam murmured, trying to calm his own racing heart. "We belong here. Our design is good. Just stick to the plan." "Belong here," David whispered back, his eyes wide, as he took in a massive abstract sculpture that probably cost more than their entire firm was worth. "Liam, these people probably use $100 bills as bookmarks. We're about to present our life's work to a bunch of corporate droids who have never worried about making rent. That's why our design is better," Liam countered, his voice low but firm. "It has heart. They'll see that." A severe-looking assistant with an iPad led them down a long white hallway and into the main boardroom. The room was breathtaking. One entire wall was a pane of glass, offering a panoramic view of the Seattle skyline. A long, dark mahogany table dominated the space, surrounded by about a dozen people in impeccably tailored suits. They were the board members and senior executives of Aura Innovations. Liam and David took their places at the far end of the table, setting up their laptop and presentation materials. Liam's eyes scanned the faces of the people who held his future in their hands. They were a mix of ages and genders, all exuding an aura of immense power and intelligence. At the head of the table facing them directly was a single empty chair. "Ms. Rossi will be with you shortly," the assistant said before gliding silently out of the room. Liam knew the name, Isabella Rossi, the CEO, the mysterious heiress who had taken over from her legendary father. There were few public photos of her, and she was notoriously private. The business world whispered about her brilliance, her vision, and her almost complete withdrawal from public life. This meeting was a rare, almost unprecedented event. The door opened again. Liam straightened his posture, took a deep breath, and prepared to deliver the most important pitch of his life. A woman walked in. She was poised and elegant, dressed in a sharp, dark blue suit that spoke of quiet, astronomical expense. Her dark hair, which he'd last seen in a messy ponytail, was styled in a sleek, professional chignon. Her face was the same high cheekbones, the same expressive mouth, but the panicked, exhausted look in her eyes was gone. It had been replaced by an unreadable, unnerving calm. As she took her seat at the head of the table, her brown eyes swept across the room and finally landed on him. For a fraction of a second, her composure wavered. He saw a flash of something in her eyes, shock, panic, recognition. And in that same instant, Liam's world tilted on its axis. His breath caught in his throat. His carefully rehearsed opening remarks evaporated from his mind. The boardroom, the skyline, the powerful executives. It all faded into a deafening roar in his ears. It was her, Bella, the clumsy waitress from the corner spoon. He stared, his mind refusing to process what his eyes were seeing. It was impossible. A trick of the light. A bizarre coincidence. But it wasn't. It was her, the woman he had felt a strange kinship with, the woman he had bought a plate of toast for out of a sense of shared humanity. She was Isabella Rossi, the Billionaire CEO. A cold dread, sharp and sickening, washed over him. the coffee spill, the stolen wallet, the overwhelming distress. Was it all a lie? A game, some kind of cruel, twisted social experiment for the amusement of the ultra-rich. His act of kindness, a moment he had thought was genuine and private, suddenly felt like a performance he hadn't known he was giving. He felt like a fool. A pawn. "Good morning, gentlemen," Isabella Rossi said, her voice smooth and steady, betraying none of the turmoil he had seen in her eyes just a moment before. "I am Isabella Rossi. Thank you for being here. We are eager to see what O'Connell and Croft has to propose. Please begin when you are ready." Her gaze was fixed on him, a silent, desperate plea he couldn't begin to decipher. David, oblivious, nudged him. "Liam, that's our cue." Liam felt a hot flush of anger and humiliation creep up his neck. He looked from her composed, powerful face back to his portfolio, filled with a design that was all about heart authenticity and human connection. It felt like a mockery. He stood up, his legs feeling unsteady. He opened his mouth to speak, but the words that came out were not the ones he had practiced. They were cold, clipped, and devoid of the passion he had felt just minutes before. The heart had been ripped out of his presentation because the woman he was presenting to had, he believed, just ripped out his. He was no longer an architect sharing his dream. He was a man going through the motions, performing for the woman who had made a complete and utter fool of him. The presentation was a technical success and an emotional disaster. Liam spoke with a chilling precision, his voice a monotone, as he walked the board through the structural plans, the energy efficiency models, and the material specifications. He laid out the logic of their design, but none of the soul. The passion, the stories behind the communal spaces, the philosophy of a workplace built for people. First, all of it was gone, locked away behind a wall of cold fury. David, sensing the shift, tried to compensate, injecting warmth and enthusiasm into his part of the presentation, but the damage was done. When they finished, a polite, sterile silence filled the room. Isabella was the first to speak. "Thank you, Mr. O'Connell, Mr. Croft. It is a very thorough proposal. We will be in touch." Her voice was professionally placid, but her eyes, when they met, Liam's, were filled with an unmistakable anguish. Liam simply nodded, packed his materials, and walked out of the boardroom without another word, leaving David to stammer his thanks. The elevator ride down was silent. As soon as the doors opened into the cavernous lobby, David exploded. "What the hell was that, Liam?" "You froze. You sounded like a robot reading a manual. We had them. The design is brilliant, but you sold it like it was a funeral eulogy." "I don't want the job," Liam said, his voice dangerously low as he strode towards the exit. "You don't? Are you insane? This is everything we've worked for." "It was a lie, David. The whole thing is a lie." Before David could question him further, a voice called out from behind them. "Mr. O'Connell, please wait." Liam turned. It was Isabella hurrying across the marble floor toward them. She had shed her professional mask. Her face was pale, her expression pleading. She stopped a few feet away, addressing him, while pointedly ignoring David. "Can we please talk for just 5 minutes?" she asked, her voice soft. "I think we're done talking, Ms. Rossi." Liam said the name, tasting like acid in his mouth. "Was the performance satisfactory? Did I pass the test? Am I the kind-hearted simpleton you were hoping to find?" Isabella flinched as if he'd slapped her. "It wasn't like that. Please, you don't understand." "Oh, I think I understand perfectly. The struggling waitress, the stolen wallet. It was all a game, wasn't it? What's the term for it? Poverty tourism. A little adventure for the billionaire who has everything." "No, it was for my father." She blurted out, her voice cracking with desperation. "He's sick. He made me do it. He wanted me to find someone genuine before I took over the company for good. He was so afraid of the people who surround me, the ones who only want the money." Liam stared at her, his anger warring with a flicker of something else. Her desperation seemed real. The story was so bizarre, it was almost believable. "So you lied to everyone. You took a job from someone who probably needed it. You played with people's empathy. Yes," she admitted, her gaze dropping to the floor. "I know how it looks. But what you did at the diner, it was the one real thing that happened to me in weeks. It meant more than you can possibly imagine. When I saw you walk into that boardroom today, I was horrified. This was not how I wanted to see you again." Just then, a sleek, handsome man in an expensive suit approached them. He had an easy, predatory grace and a smile that didn't reach his cold eyes. "Isabella, is there a problem here?" he asked, his gaze flicking dismissively over Liam and David. "It's fine, Julian," Isabella said, her tone immediately becoming more guarded. "Mr. O'Connell and I were just concluding our meeting." "Julian Vance, executive board member," the man said, offering a limp hand to Liam. "Fascinating proposal. A little sentimental for my taste, but fascinating." He then turned his full attention back to Isabella. "Lorenzo is on the line. He's asking about the presentations." The mention of her father made Isabella's posture stiffen. She looked back at Liam, her eyes conveying a silent, urgent message. "Mr. O'Connell, your design was the most innovative we saw. Regardless of this misunderstanding, it deserves to be considered. Don't withdraw. Please, give me a chance to explain properly." Julian Vance's eyebrow arched with intrigue, sensing a story he wasn't privy to. Liam felt trapped. His pride screamed at him to walk away, to scorch the earth and never look back. But his dream, the building, the masterpiece he and David had bled for, was hanging in the balance. And despite his anger, a part of him, a small, foolish part, wanted to believe her. "Fine," he said, his voice clipped. "We'll await the board's decision. But I want nothing to do with your personal games, Ms. Rossi." He turned and walked away, leaving David to scurry after him and Isabella, standing between the cold marble of her lobby and the colder gaze of Julian Vance, who was now looking at Liam's retreating back with a newfound dangerous interest. 2 days later, O'Connell and Croft got the call. They had, against all odds, made it to the final round. They were one of 2 firms left in the running. Their primary point of contact for the next phase of the project would be the CEO herself, Isabella Rossi. The alliance was not only uncomfortable, it was now unavoidable. The next few weeks were a masterclass in professional tension. Liam and Isabella's meetings were brutally efficient, strictly confined to the project. They discussed load-bearing walls, HVAC systems, and zoning permits with the detached politeness of 2 strangers who secretly despised each other. Liam was cold and distant, answering questions with curt precision. Isabella was patient and professional, but he could see the strain behind her eyes. David, caught in the middle, tried to play mediator, cracking jokes that landed with a thud in the silent, charged atmosphere. The other finalist was a corporate behemoth of a firm represented by Julian Vance's preferred architects. It became clear that Julian was their champion on the board, constantly finding fault with Liam's design and promoting his rival's more traditional, soulless skyscraper. Liam was fighting a war on 2 fronts, one against a corporate giant and another against his own complicated feelings for the woman who was technically his client. One rainy Tuesday evening, they were working late in Liam's small, cluttered office, preparing for a crucial presentation. David had already gone home. It was just Liam and Isabella, surrounded by blueprints and cardboard models. The only sounds were the scratching of Liam's pen and the drumming of a rain against the window. "The western atrium needs more natural light," Isabella said, her voice soft, almost tentative. "The simulations show a shadow falling across the main walkway after 3 p.m. Liam didn't look up from the blueprint he was marking. "We can use a series of strategically placed skylights, but it will increase the structural engineering costs." "The budget can handle it," she replied. "The well-being of the people inside is more important than the bottom line. That's what I loved about your design in the first place." The mention of his design's original intent, its heart, was the first time either of them had acknowledged the emotional core of the project since the disastrous first meeting. Liam finally put his pen down and looked at her. The power suit was gone. Tonight she was dressed in simple jeans and a sweater. Without the armor of the boardroom, she looked younger, more vulnerable. She looked more like Bella. "Why are you really doing this?" he asked, his voice raw. "Pushing for my design, Julian, and half the board are against it. You're making a powerful enemy for a sentimental building from a no-name architect." Isabella leaned back in her chair, running a hand through her hair. She looked tired. "Because it's the right design," she said. "And because I owe you. More than that. I believe in you. You don't even know me," he scoffed. "I know you're the kind of person who buys a meal for a stranger without wanting anything in return." She shot back her voice, gaining strength. "I know you're the kind of architect who thinks about how a shadow falls on a walkway at 3 p.m. I know you put your heart into those blueprints. I saw it on your face in the diner before you ever knew who I was. I see it now even when you're trying to hide it." The air crackled. The rain outside seemed to intensify. "My father is dying, Liam," she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper. The confession hung between them, heavy and fragile. "This building, it's the last thing he and I will ever build together in a way." He started Aura in a garage because he wanted to create things that connected people. Over the years it became this corporate machine. Cold, impersonal. "Your design feels like that garage. It feels like home. I want to leave him with a legacy that he can be proud of, something that proves I understood his original dream." Liam stared at her, the walls of his anger beginning to crumble. For the first time, he saw past the billionaire and the waitress. He saw a daughter trying to honor her father. He saw a woman trapped by a legacy she wasn't sure she wanted, fighting to find meaning in a world of unimaginable wealth. "The diner," he said, the question unspoken. "It was his idea," she confirmed. "The character test," he called it. "I hated it. I felt dishonest and ridiculous, and day after day it just proved him right. People were either dismissive or they were predatory. Then I spilled coffee on you." A small, sad smile touched her lips. "You weren't angry. You were just kind. You and your note about tomorrow being better. You were the one person who passed my father's test." The silence that followed was different. It wasn't tense or awkward. It was a space for understanding. "My mom," Liam found himself saying the words coming out before he could stop them. "She was a waitress for a while, after my dad left. I remember watching her count her tips on the kitchen table, trying to make the math work. Some days it didn't." Isabella's eyes glistened. "I'm sorry." "Don't be," he said, shaking his head. "It taught me that sometimes a $20 bill isn't just a $20 bill." In the quiet of the small office, with the rain as their only witness, the architect and the billionaire finally saw each other for who they were, two people shaped by their pasts, fighting for their futures. Isabella reached out and tentatively touched a corner of the blueprint he'd been working on, her fingers brushing his. The spark was immediate and undeniable. It wasn't about money or power. It was about the bare, vulnerable truth that had finally been spoken between them. The project was no longer just about a building. It was about them. And Julian Vance, they both knew, would stop at nothing to tear it and them down. The invitation came via a formal cream-colored envelope delivered by a private courier. Lorenzo Rossi requested the pleasure of Mr. Liam O'Connell's company for dinner. It wasn't a request. It was a summons. "You don't have to go," Isabella told him over the phone, her voice tight with anxiety. "He can be intimidating." "He's your father," Liam replied, staring at the elegant calligraphy on the card. "And he's the man whose legacy we're supposedly building. If I'm going to do this, I need to face him." The Rossi estate was a fortress of old money, nestled on the shores of Lake Washington. A long, winding driveway led to a sprawling mansion that looked more like a European museum than a private home. Liam, in the best suit he owned, felt like a commoner, storming the castle gates. Lorenzo Rossi was waiting for him in a grand, book-lined study. He was a shadow of the corporate titan from the photographs, frail and confined to a high-tech wheelchair, but his eyes were as sharp and penetrating as chips of obsidian. An oxygen tube ran discreetly beneath his nose. "Mr. O'Connell." Lorenzo said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. The kind-hearted architect. "Sit." He gestured to a leather armchair that probably cost more than Liam's car. There was no small talk. Lorenzo cut straight to the chase. "Isabella tells me you are a man of integrity. I, however, am a man of evidence. You are kind to a poor waitress, a noble gesture. But now you know who she is. You stand to win the most lucrative contract of your life, and the affection of one of the world's wealthiest women. Your kindness now has a potential price tag of several $billion. Forgive my cynicism, but your integrity is as of yet unproven." "With all due respect, sir," Liam said, meeting the old man's gaze without flinching, "my integrity isn't for sale, and neither is my affection. I fell for your daughter when I thought she was a clumsy waitress named Bella who couldn't afford a plate of toast. Finding out she was Isabella Rossi didn't make me happy. It made me angry. It made me feel like a fool." A flicker of surprise crossed Lorenzo's face. "Go on." "Your test was cruel," Liam continued, emboldened. "Not just to her, but to everyone she interacted with. You wanted to find someone genuine, but you built the entire experiment on a foundation of deceit. The only reason Isabella and I are even talking is because the design my partner and I created is the best one for your company. The fact that I'm starting to care for her, in spite of the lies, is something that has happened against my better judgment." Lorenzo was silent for a long moment, studying Liam with an unnerving intensity. Before he could respond, a butler announced that dinner was served. The meal was a tense, formal affair in a dining room that could have seated 50. Isabella, caught between the two men, was quiet and anxious. Simultaneously across the city, Julian Vance was making his move. He knew he was losing his grip on the project, and more importantly, on Isabella. He had long seen himself as Lorenzo's rightful successor, not just in business, but as Isabella's partner. Liam was an obstacle that needed to be removed. He orchestrated a leak. An anonymous source sent a falsified memo to a prominent architecture blogger, suggesting that O'Connell and Croft had stolen key design elements for the Aura proposal from a student project at a European university. The memo was cleverly forged, intertwining real elements of Liam's design with images from an obscure thesis project that had a superficial resemblance. The blog post went live, just as dessert was being served at the Rossi mansion. Julian made sure the board members received a link to the article immediately. Then he placed a call. Back at the mansion, just as Lorenzo was starting to show a grudging respect for Liam's blunt honesty, Isabella's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and the color drained from her face. "What is it?" Lorenzo demanded. "There's an article." She stammered, her hands trembling as she read. It's accusing Liam's firm of plagiarism, citing a student's thesis from Bern. Liam felt the blood drain from his own face. "What, that's impossible. It's a lie." Lorenzo's eyes narrowed, the brief flicker of warmth gone, replaced by icy suspicion. "Plagiarism, Mr. O'Connell. Is that where your heart came from? Someone else's work?" "No, I've never even seen that project. Someone is setting me up." Liam insisted, his mind racing. It had to be Julian. It was the only thing that made sense. "A convenient denial," Lorenzo scoffed. Isabella's phone buzzed again. It was Julian. She answered, her voice shaking. "Julian, what is this?" "A disaster." Julian's voice purred with false sympathy. "The board is in an uproar. Our reputation is on the line. You have to cut ties with them immediately, Isabella. Announce that we're moving forward with the other firm. It's the only way to contain this." The trap was sprung. Isabella was cornered. In front of her sat the man she was falling for, proclaiming his innocence. In her ear was her most powerful board member, demanding she protect the company. And watching them both was her father, his face a stone mask of judgment, his test now escalating to an unbearable climax. Her next words would determine everything, the future of her company, Liam's career, and her own heart. Liam looked at her, his expression not of panic, but of quiet faith. He was trusting her to see the truth. Isabella took a deep breath, her gaze locking with her father's. "Julian," she said, her voice suddenly clear and cold as ice, "call a full emergency board meeting for 9 a.m. tomorrow, and have our legal team contact this blogger and the university in Bern. We're going to get to the bottom of this. We are not firing O'Connell and Croft. We are going to defend them." She looked directly at Liam. "And we are going to win." She hung up the phone. The room was silent. Lorenzo Rossi stared at his daughter, and for the first time that night, a slow, genuine smile spread across his face. She hadn't chosen the safe path. She hadn't protected the stock price. She had chosen the man. She had chosen integrity. His test, in its final brutal stage, was over. And she had passed. The 24 hours that followed the disastrous dinner were a crucible that would either forge their bond into something unbreakable or shatter it completely. The moment they left the Rossi estate, Liam's initial shock gave way to a cold, focused anger. Isabella, however, was already in motion, her mind operating with the ruthless efficiency of the CEO she was born to be. Her penthouse, typically a space of quiet solitude, was transformed into a tactical command center. Liam, David, and Isabella, along with two of Aura's top in-house lawyers, huddled around the massive smart glass coffee table, which now displayed a complex web of data streams and video conferences. Coffee cups multiplied as the night deepened, a testament to their frantic race against the clock. This was not a situation where Liam was the client. They were partners in a trench, fighting for his name and their shared future. He watched, mesmerized, as Isabella orchestrated the global effort. She was no longer the clumsy waitress or the conflicted daughter. She was a general on the battlefield. With a calm authority that commanded instant obedience, she dispatched orders. A team in Zurich was tasked with contacting the university in Bern, rousing faculty members in the middle of their night. A cyber forensics unit in Palo Alto began a deep dive into the blog's origins, peeling back layers of shell corporations and ghost servers. "They're sighting the cantilevered suspension system on the east wing," Liam said, pointing to a holographic projection of his blueprint hovering over the table. "My design uses a quad helix support structure. The Byrne thesis uses a standard I-beam truss. It's a fundamentally different engineering principle. They look superficially similar to a layperson, but to an architect, it's like comparing a bicycle to a motorcycle." Isabella absorbed this, her eyes sharp. "Good. I need specifics, Liam. Give me every single point of divergence. We aren't just going to prove your innocence. We are going to humiliate whoever did this with the sheer weight of their own ignorance." Throughout the long, sleepless night, a new intimacy grew between them. In hushed tones while waiting for a server trace to complete, he told her about the professor who had inspired that very quad helix design. She, in turn, confessed her deep-seated fear of not living up to her father's legacy. They weren't just fighting a legal battle, they were sharing the parts of themselves that had been poured into the project, reinforcing the very authenticity that was under attack. By dawn, they had their arsenal. The professor from Bern had been reached and was outraged, providing a time-stamped digital copy of his work via a recorded video call. The cyber team had traced the blog's funding to a Cayman Islands account that had a clear, albeit cleverly disguised, financial link to a holding company owned by Julian Vance. When Isabella walked into the 9 a.m. board meeting, she exuded an aura of lethal calm. The room was thick with tension. The board members looked grave, their gazes shifting between her and a smug-looking Julian Vance, who sat near the head of the table, the picture of concerned leadership. "Good morning," Isabella began, her voice cutting through the silence like diamond on glass. "We are here to discuss the serious allegations of plagiarism against O'Connell and Croft. I have been advised by some," she said, her eyes briefly flicking to Julian, "to sever ties immediately to protect the company's reputation. I have chosen another path to protect the truth." For the next 30 minutes, she delivered a masterclass in corporate warfare. She didn't just present evidence. She wove a narrative of a malicious, calculated deception. She projected Liam's blueprints side by side with the student's thesis, using his own words to highlight the profound structural and philosophical differences. Then she played the video of the Swiss professor vehemently refuting any claim of plagiarism. Finally, she displayed the intricate financial web that traced the anonymous blog post directly back to Julian. She concluded, this was not an attack on a small architecture firm. This was an attack on Aura Innovations itself. It was an attempt to manipulate this board, to undermine my leadership, and to force us into a partnership with a firm that was chosen not on merit, but through cronyism and deceit. The silence in the room was absolute. Every eye was now fixed on Julian Vance. The color had drained from his face, leaving a pasty grey sheen. He started to speak a weak, stammering denial, but Isabella cut him off. "The evidence has been forwarded to our legal counsel, Julian. I trust we will receive your resignation before the end of the day." Without another word, Julian stood up his chair, scraping loudly against the floor, and walked out of the boardroom, his career in ruins. The board, stunned into submission by the sheer force of her presentation, voted unanimously. The Aura Innovations headquarters contract was awarded to O'Connell and Croft. Liam and David were in their office, fielding a dizzying barrage of calls when Isabella entered. She had changed out of her suit into jeans and a simple sweater. She looked tired, but a brilliant, triumphant light shone in her eyes. David took one look at her, then at Liam, and with a wide grin declared he was going on an urgent mission for celebratory champagne, leaving them alone. The silence that descended was filled with the unspoken emotions of the last day. "So," Liam said, his voice slightly hoarse, "that was something." He underestimated us, she replied, walking slowly toward him, her gaze never leaving his. He saw a small firm and a new CEO. He didn't see you, and he didn't see me. No, he didn't, Liam agreed, a smile finally breaking through his exhaustion. You were incredible, Isabella. Truly. We were incredible, she corrected softly, stopping just before him. You built the dream, Liam. I just protected it. You protected me, he said, his voice thick with emotion. He reached out his hand, gently cupping her cheek, his thumb stroking her skin. The last vestiges of his anger, of his doubt, had been burned away in the fire of the last 24 hours. He saw her now completely. Not as Bella the waitress or Isabella the CEO, but as the woman who had stood by him, who had fought for him, who believed in him. He leaned in and kissed her. It was a kiss that sealed every promise they hadn't yet spoken. It was a release of all the tension, all the fear, and the beginning of a quiet, profound certainty. It was the moment their two worlds, which had collided so violently, finally and perfectly merged into one. Months later, on a crisp autumn evening, they sat in the back booth at the corner spoon. The scent of coffee and bacon was the same, a comforting anchor to the day it all began. On Isabella's left hand, a simple, elegant ring designed by Liam, a loop of white gold that twisted into a perfect miniature cantilever, caught the warm diner light. Outside, the first steel beams of the Aura headquarters were rising against the Seattle skyline, a building that was no longer just a project, but a symbol of their story. Lorenzo Rossi was in remission, his daughter's happiness proving to be the most effective medicine. O'Connell and Croft was now a thriving firm sought after for their integrity as much as their innovation. Isabella took a sip of her coffee, a genuine smile playing on her lips. It's strange, she mused. My father sent me here to find one honest person in a world he thought was corrupt. He thought he was testing my judgment of others. What was he testing? Liam asked, taking her hand across the table. He was testing me, she said, her eyes shining. He was testing whether I could recognize true value when it wasn't presented in a portfolio or a stock ticker. He was testing if I could see the man behind the gesture. Liam turned his napkin over, took a pen from his jacket, and began to sketch. It wasn't a skyscraper this time. It was a small house on a hill overlooking the water, with a messy garden and a dog chasing a ball. It was their new foundation. I see you, he said softly, sliding the napkin across to her. I always have. Liam and Isabella's story is a powerful reminder that our true character is revealed in the small, unseen moments. It's about what we do when we think no one important is watching. A simple act of compassion, offered without any expectation of reward, set in motion a chain of events that exposed lies, revealed truths, and ultimately built a love stronger than any skyscraper. Their journey shows us that authenticity is magnetic, and that integrity is a currency more valuable than any inheritance. Love isn't about finding someone who fits into our world. It's about finding someone who helps us build a new one, grounded in trust and mutual respect. If this story touched your heart and reminded you of the power of kindness, please take a moment to hit that like button to let us know. Share this video with someone who might need a reminder that good people are still out there. And most importantly, subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you never miss another story that proves love truly is the greatest fortune of all. What was your favorite moment in their story? Let us know in the comments below.